The core experiment of The Quiet Sleep was to prove the narrative potential of highly systemic games where the pieces hold a lot of semantic value. What this means is that each of the game pieces holds a lot of value external to the systems of the game. For instance, a couple of important currencies are will and energy. This in turn causes their interactions to gain meaning that also holds outside the game. This is all just an attempt at communicating through systems, and I feel this was a success because it says some things in ways that I've never seen before. The game is a city builder tower defense game because I like the tension of roads where city builders like them straight and tower defenses like them windy. But just that mashup lacks the semantic value that I want. It would be a game where all that the player will really take away is how to be good at the game, and I want players to take away a little more than that. Basically, I want to put something of myself into the game and have players be able to take that back out. And I'll get back to that a couple more times over this talk. Now, the first example of storytelling in The Quiet Sleep is how casual racism can appear, causing anger that you then have to calm through painting and walking, which take up energy, which you would have otherwise used for something like working. Now, this bit is actually not from my personal experiences, it's just something that worked well mechanically, and I'll talk about my experiences with racism in a different game. So, the way the game works is that parts of yourself generate currencies and you can develop yourself through these currencies and create other parts of yourself that convert basic currencies into more advanced currencies. There are also towers that calm your emotions, goals that you can set for yourself, and goals that arise naturally, and all of these come up on traits that represent different parts of your personality, such as adulthood. Now, the second example of the experimental storytelling in The Quiet Sleep is a point where you have the ability to get over past failures, but that costs 6 self-esteem, and you have the ability to get over current successes, and that only costs 1 will. And seeing that contrast tells a fair bit of a story in and of itself. Now, this is not personal, it's something I used to deal with, but not something that I deal with as much anymore. What is personal is how the game represents the snowballing of problems, where it's easy to tell yourself that you should take some time off after going through something heavy, but that lacks the quantification that it needs to be meaningful. Essentially, to take the previous example, after that racist incident, you'll find your defenses are depleted, and you should take some time to recharge them. But it's also worth noting that there are times where the correct thing to do is just to power through the fact that you're a little down at the moment and keep your normal workload. The ability to say that there are both times where you should power through and times where you shouldn't, and to quantify what the difference there. That's what I can do because The Quiet Sleep is a video game, and that's what keeps the saying from being a mere platitude. Now, another example of the storytelling of The Quiet Sleep is in the second story, where you show your lover the music that you've just made, and your lover becomes cold to you because that music just doesn't appeal. Now, at the same time as this, your muse shows up, and the thing is that you need self-esteem to continue to make music. Normally you would get that from the lover, but now you have the option of getting it much easier from the muse while you're fighting with the lover at the same time. And this is a common story, but to see it represented mechanically makes it feel very different from traditional tellings of this story. Additionally, it gives the player autonomy as to how far they wish to go in either direction, and that also drastically changes the experience. And this, incidentally, is actually not based on my personal life, just in case you were wondering. Now, what The Quiet Sleep does is it allows you to visualize your mind. You can see spending will to develop yourself. You can see calming yourself as a tower defense. You can see that emotions that you're feeling at the moment are part of who you are. And you can also see your mind expand over time as you develop it with the game. Now, through this, The Quiet Sleep functions very well as a self-help book. Most self-help books focus on affirmation, but due to the fact that it's a game, The Quiet Sleep can be difficult and so force engagement with its ideas. Incidentally, The Quiet Sleep is also fantastic fantasy fulfillment because it lets you be a better person just by spending will. Now, another example of storytelling with The Quiet Sleep is in the third story, where you're playing against an AI, where the two of you are staking out positions in your relationship. And the AI gets will directly while you have to synthesize it from anxiety. And so it's just very easy for the other person to do everything while you have to struggle. And that just feels viscerally unfair. And that in itself is the story that I wanted to tell with that aspect of the game. Another piece here is how in the second story you can get overwhelmed with happiness, and that can make you appear obnoxious to the people around you. And that's actually something that comes from me myself, where I feel that it's important to keep control over how you're acting, no matter how excited you might be at the moment. Now, the fifth example of storytelling in The Quiet Sleep, which is actually the core of the entire game, is in the first story. It's at the end of the first story. So you play as an immigrant and you get industry and energy from your upbringing, from your homeland as such. But it turns out over the course of the game that you're actually a Manchurian candidate. And if you want to throw off your programming, you have to renounce your homeland. But once you do that, the entire trait disappears, and then you can never get industry as easily again. And this is actually personal, not because I'm a Manchurian candidate, but because I started The Quiet Sleep after 2 years on a different game, and that game had become such a part of my routine that once I quit it and once it was gone, I had to rebuild a lot of myself to try to get a routine back in place. Now, I like calling games like this lifelike, in that roguelike games are like Rogue, and games like this are like Life. The key aesthetic of The Quiet Sleep is novelty through familiarity, right, where you see familiar ideas presented in a novel, mechanical manner. And this can feel wrong because systems and systemic communication doesn't have the developed tolerance of traditional media. Translations are always lossy, and representations are also always lossy. And we're used to that with traditional media, but it feels wrong with something so systems heavy as The Quiet Sleep. But if you were to look at something like combat systems make no sense. They are not connected to actual real life combat systems. But it's okay for them to be lossy because it feels less personal than a representation of how you think. The Quiet Sleep is a very tech, very rationalist approach, but the way to look at it is as a lens or a filter. It lets you focus on a single aspect of the process, and so consider that aspect in greater detail. And this is the semantic meaning that I was talking about. I built this game because I want you to interact with my beliefs. I came into this game with a set of them, and I built it to force you to engage with some of them. And I think I've achieved that in a way that no other game has. Thank you.